The baby monitor showed my son sleeping peacefully, but the timestamp was frozen for 20 minutes. When I ran to his room, the window was wide open and the crib was empty. A stranger in a police uniform handcuffed me at a New Year's party, but he wasn't a real cop, and the SUV that picked me up wasn't going to any station. My neighbor invited me for dinner on New Year's Eve, but when I tried to leave, I discovered he'd screwed the windows shut and installed locks that needed keys from the inside. These are 3 true stories that will change how you celebrate New Year's forever. What you're about to hear actually happened, and before we begin, if disturbing real-life encounters terrify you as much as they do me, hit that subscribe button right now because we share these stories every week. Now let me tell you what happened. 2 years ago, my wife Emma and I experienced something that still haunts us every single night. We were new parents. Our baby boy Mason was just 3 months old. If you've ever had a newborn, you know your entire life changes overnight. Before Mason, we'd spend New Year's Eve at clubs or massive parties. But that year, our biggest goal was simply staying awake until midnight. Mason had been struggling with colic for weeks, screaming nonstop every evening from 6 until 9. But that particular night, he went down easily around 8:30. If you're already getting chills, drop a comment telling me if you're a parent, because what happens next is every parent's absolute worst nightmare. We placed Mason in his crib in the nursery on our 2nd floor, at the back of the house. We had an expensive video monitor, the kind that connects to your phone and has a dedicated handheld screen. We set that screen right on our coffee table, next to our snacks, and settled in to watch the New Year's coverage. The volume was low, and honestly, we were both dozing off by 10:30. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the monitor. It showed that grainy black and white night vision image. I could see Mason all swaddled up, his tiny chest rising and falling. He looked more peaceful than he had in weeks. Around 11:50, the TV host started getting excited. I turned up the volume just slightly. Emma went to grab sparkling cider from the kitchen since she was nursing and avoiding alcohol. Outside, our neighborhood was coming alive. People in our suburb take fireworks very seriously. A few pops went off down the street. I checked the monitor. Mason hadn't moved. He's completely out, I called to Emma. I just hope the big fireworks don't wake him. If he wakes up, you're handling it, she laughed, sitting beside me. 11:59, the countdown started. 10, 9, 8. We counted along and raised our glasses at midnight. Immediately, our neighborhood transformed into a war zone. Someone nearby must have bought professional-grade fireworks because the explosions were literally shaking our windows. It was loud, incredibly loud. I immediately looked at the monitor, bracing myself to see Mason screaming. But he wasn't. He was perfectly motionless. "Wow," Emma said, looking over my shoulder. "He must be exhausted." He didn't even flinch. I stared at the screen. Another massive boom rattled our house. The neighbor's dog started barking frantically. On the screen, Mason remained absolutely still. That's when something felt wrong. Mason was an extremely light sleeper. He'd wake up if we stepped on a creaky floorboard. How was he sleeping through explosions that were shaking our walls? Guys, if you're feeling that sense of dread right now, smash that like button because it's about to get so much worse. I picked up the monitor to look closer. The image was clear. Baby in crib, still sleeping. Then I noticed something in the top corner. The monitor had a small digital timestamp showing the current time. It read 11:42 p.m. I looked at our cable box. It read 12:04 a.m. My blood turned to ice. The image wasn't live. It was frozen. It had been frozen for over 20 minutes. "Emma, the monitor's frozen," I said, my voice barely working. "What?" "Look at the timestamp. It says 11:42. He's not sleeping through the noise. We're not actually watching him right now." I didn't wait for her response. I dropped the monitor and sprinted for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Emma was right behind me, gasping. The hallway was dark. I threw open the nursery door. I expected crying. I expected him to be sleeping. Instead, I felt cold air rushing past me. I hit the light switch. The curtains were blowing violently inward. The window we always kept locked was wide open. The screen had been cut and was lying on the lawn below. I ran to the crib. Empty. The swaddle blanket was there, unraveled and tossed aside. But Mason was gone. "He's gone," I screamed, a sound I didn't know I was capable of making. Emma ran in, saw the empty crib, and collapsed, screaming his name over and over. Before I continue, I need you to pause and subscribe right now if you haven't already, because what happened next involves police, a manhunt, and a truth so disturbing that we sold our house and moved within 3 months. I ran to the window and looked down. The street was dark except for distant firework flashes. The celebratory sounds felt like mockery now. While we'd been downstairs, toasting the new year and watching a frozen image of our son, someone had climbed up, cut through our screen, and taken him. I called 911, shouting so loud the operator had to calm me down to get our address. The next hour was a chaos of police lights and radios. They established a perimeter immediately. An officer told us whoever did this timed it perfectly. The fireworks masked any sound of the window opening. They knew we'd be distracted. They found footprints in the snow leading to our side gate, which had been left unlatched. I held Emma, both of us shaking, thinking about how I'd looked at that monitor at 11:50. 11:55, thinking he was safe. I'd been staring at a frozen image while my baby was being carried into the darkness. About 2 hours later, a radio crackled. Suspect detained. We have the infant. He appears unharmed. We both collapsed in relief. They found her 4 blocks away. A woman in her late 40s, walking down the sidewalk at 2 a.m. in freezing weather, humming to herself and holding Mason wrapped in a coat. A patrol car stopped her because it seemed strange. When questioned, she claimed he was her grandson but couldn't provide his name or birth date correctly. We learned she lived in our neighborhood. She'd lost her own child years before and had suffered a breakdown. She'd been watching our house for weeks, learning our routine, observing the nursery window. She'd planned everything for New Year's Eve, knowing the fireworks would provide perfect cover. We got Mason back that night. He was cold and hungry, but physically okay. We didn't sleep for days. We sold that house 3 months later. We couldn't stay somewhere we'd been watched like that. We threw that monitor away. Now we keep the nursery door open, and one of us is always awake. Technology can lie to you. And sometimes the most terrifying things happen when you think you're safest, right under your nose, on the one night you're supposed to celebrate. Drop a comment if you think you could ever trust a baby monitor again after hearing this. I've never been big on parties. I'm the person standing against the wall, checking my phone every 10 minutes. But it was New Year's Eve 2019, and my roommates Jake and Chris practically forced me to attend this huge house party in the Chicago suburbs. The place was packed, music blasting, the smell of cologne and perfume everywhere. I didn't know most people there, just friends of friends. I was standing by the kitchen counter around 11:45, feeling out of place and counting down until I could leave. Then the music cut out abruptly. The silence was jarring. Heavy pounding echoed from the front door. Police! Open up! My stomach dropped. I hadn't done anything illegal, but that instinctive fear kicked in immediately. Everyone froze. Jake walked to the door and opened it. A police officer stepped inside. He looked completely legitimate, dark uniform, shiny badge, utility belt loaded with equipment. Big guy, tall, broad-shouldered. He scanned the room with a flashlight. The beam landed directly on me. Is there a David Miller here? My heart started racing. Every eye in the room turned toward me. Aye, that's me, I managed to say. The officer pushed through the crowd, which parted instantly. Step forward, he commanded. We have a warrant for your arrest concerning a hit-and-run incident on December 20th. Turn around. Hit and run? I shouted. I haven't hit anyone. I drive a Corolla. There must be some mistake. Tell it to the judge. Turn around now. If you've ever had that nightmare where you're arrested for something you didn't do, hit that like button because this gets insane. He grabbed my shoulder, spun me around, and pulled out handcuffs. The sound of them clicking tight around my wrists echoed through the silent room. They hurt. He'd fastened them too tight. He recited my rights as he shoved me toward the door. I looked back at Jake and Chris. They stood there, mouths open, looking terrified. I silently begged them with my eyes to help, but they just stood frozen. The officer marched me into the freezing night. The wind cut through my thin shirt. Officer, please check my license. I was at work on the 20th. I begged. Quiet. We reached the curb. I expected to see a police car with flashing lights. The street was empty, dark and silent. Where's your car? I asked, confused. Before he could answer, a large black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly down the street. No police markings, but it had red and blue lights behind the grille. The officer holding me tensed up. He stopped walking. The SUV pulled up right beside us. The window rolled down. A man in the driver's seat. I couldn't see his face clearly, just a silhouette. "I've got him," the driver said, his voice rough. "Prisoner transport. Put him in the back." The officer beside me hesitated. For just a moment, he looked confused, maybe even scared. "Get in," he said quickly, his voice suddenly nervous. He opened the back door and practically shoved me inside. "Wait," I started, but he slammed the door. Through the tinted glass, I watched him turn and sprint back toward the house. He didn't look like a cop anymore. He looked like someone fleeing a crime scene. The SUV accelerated instantly. I slid across the leather seat, since my hands were cuffed behind me. The car smelled horrible, like wet dog and chemicals. "Sir, where are we going?" "Which station?" I called out. No answer. He was driving way too fast. We blew through a stop sign. "Hey, you just ran a stop sign." He turned onto a road leading away from the city, toward the old industrial area. "Sir, the station is downtown. Comment right now if you've figured out what's happening, because David is about to realize the horrifying truth." The driver finally looked in the rearview mirror. He wasn't wearing a police hat. He was wearing a dirty baseball cap, and he was smiling. "We're not going to the station, David," he said softly. "What?" "I saw your friend bring you out. Nice of him to package you up for me, handcuffed and everything. Saves me so much work." My blood went cold. "My friend? That was a COP." The driver laughed, a dry, awful sound. "That wasn't a cop, kid. That was a costume. I've been watching that house for 2 hours waiting for someone to walk out alone. I got lucky, you walked out in chains." The reality hit me like a physical blow. The officer inside was an actor. A prank. That's why Jake and Chris looked so shocked. They'd hired someone to scare me. That's why he looked nervous when this SUV showed up. He thought it was actual police, and he'd get busted for impersonating an officer. So he handed me over to get rid of the evidence. I wasn't in police custody. I was in a stranger's vehicle, handcuffed, heading into darkness. "Let me out," I screamed, kicking the door. "Not a chance," he said, clicking the locks. He reached under his seat and pulled out something metallic. "Now sit back. The new year is just starting." We were miles from the party now. No more streetlights. Just headlights cutting through darkness, past cornfields and abandoned warehouses. I started hyperventilating, pulling at the handcuffs until my wrists bled. They were real police-grade cuffs. The car slowed and turned onto a gravel road leading into dense woods near a river. "Please," I sobbed. "I have money. Take my wallet." "I don't want your money," he said, putting the car in park and killing the engine. Darkness swallowed us whole. "I just want to play." Guys, if your heart is pounding right now, please subscribe, because what happens next is pure survival mode. He opened his door and walked around to my side. I heard his boots crunching on gravel. I squeezed my eyes shut, curling my legs to my chest, ready to kick. The door flew open. Cold air rushed in. He reached for me. I kicked out with everything I had. My heel connected with his chest, knocking the wind out of him. He stumbled backward, cursing. I scrambled out and fell face first onto frozen dirt. Without my hands to break the fall, my nose took the full impact. Pain exploded through my face, but adrenaline numbed it instantly. "You little," he roared. I got up and ran, blindly into the woods. Without arms for balance, I stumbled into trees, branches tearing at my face. "I have a flashlight," he yelled. "You can't hide." A beam of light cut through the trees, sweeping back and forth. I threw myself behind a thick oak tree, pressing against the bark, trying to control my gasping breaths. I heard him walking. Slow. Methodical. "Come on out, David. You're still wearing the bracelets. You can't get far." He was right. I couldn't climb, couldn't fight properly. I was helpless. About 10 feet away, I spotted an old drainage pipe half buried in the ground. It looked too small, but it was my only option. When the flashlight swung away, I dove for it. I wiggled inside feet first. It was tight, claustrophobic, filled with freezing mud. I pushed back as far as possible, the smell of rot overwhelming. Footsteps stopped right outside. The light shone in. I held my breath, tears streaming down my face. The light didn't reach me, but it was close. So close. "I know you're near," he whispered. He stood there for 5 minutes, just listening. I didn't move, didn't blink. Finally, he kicked the pipe, a deafening clang, then walked away. I stayed in that pipe until sunrise. When I finally crawled out, half frozen and covered in filth, I walked for over an hour until I found a gas station. The clerk nearly had a heart attack seeing me. Police came and cut off the cuffs. At the station, Jake and Chris were there, crying. They explained everything. The first officer was an actor friend hired to prank me, arrest me, drive me around the block, then bring me back for laughs. But when that black SUV appeared with lights flashing, the actor panicked, thinking he was caught by real undercover cops. He handed me over to save himself. The man in the SUV? They found it abandoned a week later. Stolen vehicle. The inside was lined with plastic sheeting. They never found him. I don't speak to Jake or Chris anymore. I moved to a different state. Leave a comment telling me if you could ever forgive friends who did this. Back in 2018, I was a college junior living in a depressing basement apartment in Ohio. It was one of those cheap complexes with paper-thin walls and hallways that always smelled damp. I was taking winter courses and working part-time retail, so I couldn't afford to fly home to California for the holidays. When New Year's Eve came around, I was completely alone. Both my roommates had gone home, leaving the apartment silent. Around 7 p.m., I was heating frozen pizza, trying to ignore the sounds of distant parties, when someone knocked heavily on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. It was my neighbor from across the hall, a guy named Richard. He was probably late 50s, balding, always wearing thick sweaters. We'd only spoken in passing. He seemed harmless, just awkward and lonely. I opened the door. "Hey Richard. What's up?" He shifted nervously. "Hello Tom. I made a roast tonight. New Year's tradition. But I made way too much for one person. I saw your lights on and figured you might be alone too. Would you like to join me?" Honestly, the smell coming from his apartment was incredible. Rosemary and garlic. Way better than my frozen pizza. I hesitated, but I felt bad for him. He was clearly trying to be nice. "Sure," I said. "Let me grab my phone. If you're already screaming at your screen telling me not to go, hit that subscribe button because your instincts are right." I locked my door and followed him inside. His apartment had the same layout as mine, but the atmosphere was completely different. Mine was messy with textbooks everywhere. His was disturbingly neat. Almost no furniture, just a small table with 2 chairs, a brown couch, and no TV. The only light came from a dim corner lamp and the kitchen. "Sit," he urged, gesturing to the wooden table. He'd already set it perfectly. 2 plates, silverware lined up precisely, a bottle of soda. As I sat down, I heard it. Click. The deadbolt locking behind me. I turned around. Richard was standing by the door, smiling. "Just to keep the draft out," he said. He sat across from me and started serving food. The roast actually tasted amazing, but the conversation felt off. He didn't ask normal questions like, "What's your major?" or "How's school?" Instead, "So your roommates are gone all week, right?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "They'll be back on the 4th. And your parents? Do they know you're here alone?" I hadn't actually texted them yet. "We talked earlier." "Why?" "Oh, just making conversation," Richard said, staring without blinking. It's rare to see a young man so isolated. He poured me soda. I didn't drink it, just pushed food around my plate. The silence was suffocating, broken only by occasional fireworks outside. About 20 minutes in, Richard dropped his fork. It clattered loudly. "I have a surprise for dessert," he said, his voice dropping lower. "I made it specifically for you." "I should probably head back," I said, starting to stand. "Need to call my mom." "Sit down," he said. It wasn't a request. "I really need to go." I said sit down. His face had changed completely. No more nervous friendliness. Just blank coldness. Then a cell phone started ringing. Not mine. And not from Richard's pocket. It was coming from the back bedroom. Drop a like right now if you're getting chills, because what's in that bedroom changes everything. Richard's eyes widened. He looked toward the bedroom with genuine panic. "Stay right here. Do not move." He hurried down the hall into the bedroom and closed the door. This was my chance. As soon as that door clicked, I bolted for the front door and grabbed the deadbolt. It wouldn't turn. It was a double-cylinder lock, the kind that needs a key from inside. My apartment didn't have this. He'd installed it himself. I looked frantically for a key. There was a small bowl on the side table. Empty. From the bedroom, I heard Richard's voice, muffled but angry. "You ruined it. You were supposed to be quiet." My heart hammered. I realized he was yelling at someone. I couldn't use the front door. I ran to the kitchen. We were on ground level, so the windows were accessible. I tried sliding the window up. It wouldn't budge. I looked closer. Screws. Driven into the frame. He'd sealed the windows shut. I heard the bedroom door open. I grabbed the heavy soda bottle from the table and ducked behind the kitchen island, clutching it like a weapon. "Tom!" Richard called out, his voice sickeningly sweet again. "Where did you go?" "Dessert is ready." I peeked around the corner. He was holding duct tape in one hand and a box cutter in the other. "Guys, if you're on the edge of your seat, comment what you would do in this situation because Tom is about to fight for his life." He started checking corners, moving toward the bathroom. He was between me and the door. I needed a distraction. On the counter was the roast on a heavy ceramic platter. I grabbed it and hurled it toward the bathroom door with everything I had. It shattered against the wall. Richard spun toward the noise. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I sprinted from the kitchen and charged straight at him before he could turn back. I slammed my shoulder into his chest. He tripped backward and hit the floor hard. The box cutter skidded away across the floor. I didn't try to fight. I needed that key. I looked down at him as he groaned, trying to get up. I saw something shiny clipped to his belt loop. Keys. I dove for him. He grabbed my ankle with surprising strength. I kicked back, stomping my heel onto his wrist until he screamed and released me. I ripped the keys off and scrambled to the deadbolt, jamming the key in with shaking hands. "You can't leave." Richard screamed, getting up, blood dripping from his nose. The lock clicked. I threw the door open and fell into the hallway. I didn't go to my apartment. I ran straight up the stairs, out of the building, into the cold night. I didn't stop running until I reached a 24-hour gas station 3 blocks away. I called police from the clerk's phone, shaking violently. When police arrived, Richard was gone. His door was wide open. But what they found inside made me drop out of school and move back home immediately. In the bedroom, there wasn't another person. The voice he'd been yelling at was a recording of himself. He'd been practicing. But that wasn't the worst part. In his closet, they found a hidden crawl space connected to the vents. Vents that led directly into MY apartment. They found photographs. Hundreds of them. Photos of me sleeping. Photos of me watching TV. Photos taken from inside my bedroom while I was at class. He'd been entering my apartment for months, using a spare key he'd stolen or copied from the landlord. The dessert, he mentioned? Police found a syringe and a bottle of sedatives on his kitchen counter. They never found Richard. To this day, every New Year's Eve, I triple-check my locks. And I never answer a knock after dark. If these stories gave you chills, you need to subscribe right now because we post terrifying true stories every single week. Drop a comment telling me which story scared you the most, and hit that like button if you'll never look at New Year's Eve the same way again. Stay safe out there. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones watching from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment when you think you're safe.